She's a very renowned scholar. She's a professor at the New York School of Women's Studies in Kolkata, and has been internationally published. I just picked up one of her works, The Moving Space Women in Dance, which of course I find very interesting as a topic. But that's not going to be the topic today. The topic today, as you can already read, is Modern Moves, the Bengal Chapter. And I've already learned that there's even a German connect, which I find even more fascinating because I didn't expect this at all. Before I hand over, I would just like to invite you all. As you might know, this is a cooperation between Basement 21 and the Goethe-Institut. Basement 21 is responsible for the wonderful Marchland Festival happening ideally once a year at the Institute. And this lecture is part of a series that tries to not focus the contemporary dance in one event in March here at the Institute, but to have regular exchanges, events happening, so that it's kind of spread out through the year and you don't have to wait for 12 months for something to happen. So there are regular events. Please check it out. You'll find all the announcements on our homepage, on Basement 21's homepage, on Instagram, in the newspaper, or wherever you get your information from. So please, if you're interested in contemporary dance, do follow this. And now, I just say a few words.
Shall I stand up?
No. So, Dr. Aishika has been introduced. Thank you. And thank you so much to Goethe for this ongoing invitation to keep events alive. So, in March this year for the festival, we had one day where we had a screening of some excerpts of Uday Shankar's Kalpana, and a lovely talk to accompany it with Sadanand and Professor Bhavan. And since that moment, of course, many questions arose because we realized how few of the younger dancers in the audience actually knew anything about what had happened in those decades when they were working. And also the question for us as thinking a lot about what is contemporary dance in India today, where did it come from? Is it something that just started to happen post-liberalization in the 90s? Was there a past? And how can we possibly make any sense of the present without clearly understanding? And I mean, alongside the rich history which Chennai had, worked through the work of Chandra, I'd say the other very important center was Calcutta. And I think, and these two parts of the country and the dance movement have historically been in conversation in various ways. And it's been our feeling that those conversations have somehow died up or haven't been kept alive, haven't progressed. And we very much hope to reignite, in your words, Aishika, these conversations and these understandings of what happened in this time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Shall I take this mic?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much, Basement 21. Thank you, Max Mueller Bhavan, for making it possible. I was really looking forward to September. Come September, I'll go to Madras, Chennai. For me, it's Madras always. So finally, thank you for making this happen. Thank you. And yes, Modern Moves, the Bengal chapter, I will try to map the history of modern dance, the tradition of contemporary dance. I'll try to trace the root and the root of the modern contemporary modern, mostly from Bengal. So contemporary dance with a capital C, like the classical with a capital C, emerged as a significant area of practice as well as research, and it actually presented before us a kaleidoscopic panorama of movements, kinesthetic, and it shares intersections with old and new thoughts, cultural studies, media studies, anthropology. I'm talking about the scholarship, ethnography, visual anthropology, everything. So the last few years, Indian dance history has been exploring possibilities of multidisciplinary engagements and dialogue between practice and research, history and geography, that is time and space, and dance and dancer. So today I will take dance as the natural and critical starting point of analysis, and I propose to discuss dance as an art form where the female body, feminist practice, feminist theory, is both embodied as well as disembodied. Simultaneously, I would like to kind of shift my attention from the body per se, I like to kind of not engage with the obsession with the dancing body. Of course, I'll talk about its politics, identity, and image, but I like to shift the discourse away from the body to foreground its historic and gendered identities and to privilege the agency, the subjectivity of the dancer. I like to forge links between the gendered representations, cultural constructions, and individual experiences, the life narratives of dancers. And I map the public staging of women's body, women's subjectivity in multiple dimensions. So the dancing body is not simply a product of history. It is not only written upon, but also writes and inscribes many new meanings, cultural meanings, by constantly participating and also subverting the established norms of culture, which we sometimes call classicism, sometimes called Brahmanic patriarchy, sometimes we call it. In many ways, sometimes it has the power to shake the established norms of culture. So now the question of definition, what is contemporary dance, or what are you, contemporary dance, it remains a stubborn one. So, and setting the context of contemporary is never easy. Back in the 1960s, American dance critic Selma Ja Cohen, in her research, in her search for a definition of modern dance, found her position somewhat similar to the hookah-smoking caterpillar in Alice in Wonderland, where the caterpillar asked persistently for a definition from Alice, asking, "Who are you?" And the question ended in bewilderment and perplexity. Alice's answer was far from straightforward. She said, I hardly know, and I know who I was when I got up in the morning, but I think I have changed several times since then. So I really, as dance scholar or as a contemporary dancer, we must empathize with the caterpillar and investigate her in search of a definition. Because the caterpillar also changes, and one day it will turn into butterfly, and yet again, it doesn't understand how much or in which way a dance travels, a dance changes, and the history of dance is never the same also. And I share Cohen's discomfort when, as I realize that Alice's failure to define and explain herself in plain words. In fact, our own introspection into the journey of contemporary Indian dance will lead us in a similar and splendid confusion. So my own research on contemporary dance movement from Bengal reveals that it is never a monolithic cultural whole. It cannot be an unvarying journey of some individuals or institutions, and there is no mono actor in this one-act mono play. And far from being an unbroken flow of straightforward events, the trajectory is richly speckled, variegated. And the first pulsating drive might have begun in post-medieval colonial era, and thereafter it meandered through an uneven labyrinth in the modern and post-modern times. And in fact, the trajectory cannot be traced through an apostolic succession, that is, seeing the development of modern dance as a fan that spreads out from a single point of reference. Several paradigm shifts occurred in short but eventful journey. In the becoming of the late 19th century, renaissance-bred modern into the post-colonial contemporary, within the next 50 years, we have seen how fast past. Contemporary dance moved into something diasporic, liminal, and in between it has moved registers of seismic proportions. So when the question of definition remains the stubborn one, we must have to kind of acknowledge that there is a silence in the existing scholarship as well as in the documentation of that practice. There is an existing imbalance within the South Asian dance scholarship as well as practice. The classical is placed up at the top of the ladder as a symbol of the high national, something that is kind of museum piece, something that is our pure heritage, our authentic tradition. The folk is low but little, but it also has a tradition. The low folk is also can have a place in the 26th January procession, which is a UNESCO heritage. And it has attracted considerable scholarly and political attention. But contemporary is pushed down in the ranking, if it is at all in the ladder, because it's an heretic insider of a hallowed heritage, which has been brought to earth without a process of birth. So often identified with the outlandish Indian contemporary is posited in sharp distinction or contradicting distinction with the authentic, pure, Sanskritized, scripture-based, of course, religious, classical, and thought to be an alien imported mock-up grafted on the Indian dancer's body. And yet the contemporary and the modern sometimes used synonymously, interchangeably, it constitutes a counter-lineage, a counter-narrative of performance which has a history of more than a century or more than that. It is born out of an indigenous tradition processed through continuous subversion and negotiation. Despite this, contemporary remains isolated. It's counted neither in the historic trajectory of the nation's high art, nor in the pristine and unspoiled track of the folk and tribal. So this is the alternative third movement that I'm going to focus on today, that challenged politically and aesthetically the binaries of high and low, the fossilized exotic, displaced in museum under the generic label of Indian dance. And it may sound a little paradoxical, but I wish to map today the history of contemporary dance movement with a view to its local context as well as I will frame it by the global scenario. So as far as Bengal is concerned, instead of offering a whole picture of an unbroken or a seamless Bengal dance, I prefer to piece together some multiple broken tales from street to the stages and then to the more unsettling, though I'm not going to explore that, nightclubs or bar. Of Calcutta performs all its idiosyncrasies in dynamic interrelationship with poetics and politics. How does Calcutta kinesthetic differ from the overarching nationalist frame of performance? And do we always need to highlight difference, placing the Bengali regional identity in direct opposition to the Indian national? Because Bengal national did not necessarily stand for a single homogeneous anti-national style and rather embarked on different routes and reached different destinations in terms of its cultural production through a dialectical relationship between the nation and the international. That's why we have many transnational and transcultural transcriptions written all over the dancing bodies. Spanning a period of more than 100 years, today I will try to move backward and forward in time to present the city's repertoire, which is still irreconcilably bounded by its colonial past and deeply shaken by the nervy moments of partition and independence. I will spatialize Calcutta with the situatedness of its liminality, its post-colonial immediacy, and its cosmopolitan confederacy. The poster, because the journey may span from Tagore to Manjushri, from colonial modern to post-colonial feminist intervention by Manjushree Chaki Sarkar. This is Ranjabati Sarkar, 1963 to 1999, her daughter. I will come to their stories, their dance, a little later. But first, let me start with 19th century Calcutta. Yeah, this is the major breakthroughs that we kind of always take some pride on. Rabindranath Tagore, the eclectic, syncretic, universal, who actually started a style, a freestyle, a dance free of all style. And then Uday Shankar, it's almost parallel journey. It translated or staged the Oriental, exotic, Indian, brand Indian modern dance before the world stage and brought it back to Calcutta in the 1960s. IPTA, I'm not going to talk about IPTA, Indian People's Theatre Association, which translated the political movement and especially it's a very different kind of a theatrics that talked about the subaltern body, subaltern politics, and it's triggered by communist movement. And finally, Ranjabati and Manjushree and Ranjabati. So let's look at these pictures. This is Kalighat pot paintings, the scroll paintings of 19th century Bengal. And I am going to talk about a story of 1868, Kaliprashanna Sinha, whose pseudonymously written farcical sketch called Hutum Pachar Naksha. Hutum Pacha is the owl, wise owl. He recorded a richly speckled urban popular culture which included distinctly diverse dancing bodies in 19th century by Kanta, Kobi, Kirtan. And all the dancers, the popular, low class, low caste, indigenous dancers, not the Bai, but the Kanta, Kobi, Jatra, Kirtan, they vied with each other for patronage clientele and spectatorship from the new gentry, new Babu and the new white sahibs of Calcutta. Hutum, whose work acquired something of the status of an ethnographic source book on 19th century Calcutta, describes in fascinating detail, he was an eyewitness to that, to the culture of the city, the streets and public spaces of Calcutta as vivid as it could bring back the smell and the sense of being surrounded by the noise, lights and the smells of the city. I am quoting Partho Chatterjee. It is actually, he could bring back the sense of being surrounded by the noises, lights and smells of the city. Hutum starts his journey almost a century after the British East India Company obtained a farman over the three villages, Shutanuti, Govindapur and Kolkata, Dihi Kolkata, three small hamlets, merging them together into one administrative unit called Calcutta. The contours of the city's geography changed drastically thereafter, and so did its culture, economy and character. A tug of war was underway between the indigenous subaltern, Kanta, Kobi, and the emergent elite, whereas a boisterous little and low culture performed by the unlettered urban folk was at loggerheads with the hegemonic high of the Bhadralo. The city, as they called it, was split into two halves, one black town, inhabited by the low class people, the mostly engaged in various kind of occupational service like Bagdi, Muchi, Teli, Tati, the river, the Mueller, and the Majhi, and the white town is now the Park Street area. It's if you get a survey from the helicopter, you can just see one is actually built in, cement and marble, because it is the Fort William area, the fort area, and other is mud house and thatched hut. So, and both along the river Ganges. So the map, both white and black town is surrounded by the river Ganges. So as the heterogenetic city celebrated its virtues and vulgarity in its everyday, revelries reaching its peak in Chorok, the Bengali year-ending festival, and Baroari Durga Puja. You can see the Durga idol here, and the Cantaval is actually dancing with the indigenous dancers. And in another picture, this is the Bai, the courtesan, and I think the Durga Puja is the major event where the Babus of Calcutta invited performers from, and even in one night they perform together. Cantavalis followed by the Bais, or actually the reverse. Cantavalis were actually the last one to perform, because after the show is over, they became available to the Babus sexually. So even in Ram Lila, in Chaurok and Durga Puja, the dancers entertain the Babus and sometimes the white sahibs. Hutam informs how first the dancing bodies moved from Mehfil to Bazaar, from the courtly to the arti, and to rock the city in the most unconventional and unprecedented ways. This is a picture in 1842. It is from the collection of Victoria Memorial, and it is drawn by James Prinsep. You can see there is in this picture, this is a very important thing. I don't know it is a goat or a buffalo. So it is a custom among the Hindu Durga Puja to have meat, to slaughter an animal, and it is not a goat. It is, I think it is something else. I think this picture very, very important and very interesting. And of course the Muslim Baiji always is a much, she's the most important part of this Hindu ritual. Her dance, her music, and in this book I have a more detailed description of the Baijis, especially 19th century vernacular newspapers like Samachar Darpan. They wrote in detail how the Muslim Bais like Nikki, Asrun, Hingul, and Nikki was called the siren of the East, and how they entertained and they performed in the house of Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Prince Rabindranath Tagore, and they are the first generation of Muslim Bai. And after 1857, when Wazir Ali Shah was held captive and brought to Calcutta, and the entire cultural elite from the court of Awadh came to Calcutta, and they actually resided in the kothas or in Bara Bazar and Bay Bazar, and they performed widely. But there are also some migrant dancers. There are also some migrant bais who came, and there are also dancers from the south, which I found in the autobiographical writings of Rabindranath Tagore. So Hutam narrated that Calcutta produced the body canter, a rhythmic dance form set to live music, accompanying equally ebullient love songs, amorous songs. Keeping an eye on the nightlife of Calcutta, Hutam observed, Canta is a terrific notch. The wealthy babus of the cities watch cantas in their garden house every Sunday. Some babus even strip the cantavalis before the dance begins. In some places, the cantavalis aren't given tips till they kiss. The eye went vivid in detailing the sexual gesticulations of Canta. They swayed their hips with saucy songs of their accompaniments. And around midnight, when the dance was over, dancers became available to their patrons for the rest of the night. With the last sexual rite, the puja ground was sanctified. Canta was, however, soon to be censored as a manifestation of vulgar taste, a potential threat to the cultural integrity of the Bhadralok. But however, the Bhadraloks were the private consumers of the Canta. In his nostalgic reminiscences of the old tales of Calcutta, Mahendranath Datta is the brother of Narendranath Datta, Swami Vivekananda, eloquently documented how the city elite took initial delight in the immensely popular forms of Mei Pachali, Jatra, Todja. This is Chaurok. I think this picture is little different. This is the Chorok, this is Bengali year-ending festival. So let's come to Mahendranath Datta, because he said that Naren, that is Narendranath, Swami Vivekananda, could mimic all the songs and he could perform and all the Kishtolila and the Jatra and Panchali. Why I'm saying this? Because the May Jatra, Panchali, Torja, all made, performed and produced and directed by women performers. So there are some troops like Madan Mastared Jatra Dol and Bou Mastared Dol. After the death of Madan's son, his widowed wife, she led the Jatra. But soon, very soon, all these women performers got kind of, they vanished from the space of performance. Kashari Para's song, Kadamatir Gan. So before banishing them all from the space of performance, the Bhadralok actually took much delight to the unabashed glee of Jhunurwalis. They are the public dancers who rambled along Calcutta streets, and they were also called the raunchiest of all. They were Choto Lok, the small people, Choto Lok. They are the, what should I say, Choto Lok. Yeah, from the lower order. And the dancers, the dark-skinned raunches, Mahendranath called them Magi, and they stank when they passed by. They used to wear anklets around their feet when they sang, and in those days, during wedding ceremonies, Jhunurwalis used to dance on peacock-shaped papier-mâché boats set up on bullock carts. The highly ingenious but obscene parodies sometimes came as a slur on the city's up-and-coming social reformers like Ram Mohan Keshav Chandra Sen, and in a strident backlash, they made desperate bids to salvage their culture from becoming polluted and polluting, pressing the government, the East India Company, to put in force the sections of the Indian Penal Code to preserve public purity. Mahendranath Dutt attributed the vanishing space of Calcutta's popular performers to the reformist crusade of the Bhadraloks, the anglicized colonial elite, who actually the city's subaltern chose explosive topics like widow remarriage, sati, and they turned the performing proscenium into a dissenting space of voicing their wrath against the order. The colonial administration, now joined by the progressive elite, forcefully clamped down such public displays of wrathful vulgarity and violently evicted the indigenous popular cultural manifestations from their status, space, and livelihood. So the Bhadralok, the Indians, actually silenced their own people because the space itself became a dissenting space, and they voiced their anger against some of the very crucial reformist events. So a spectacular change occurred in Calcutta's histrionic tradition with the migration of Nautch dancers from the courts of North India, especially after the 1857 mutiny. They sought patronage from the Babus and the Sahibs. As votaries of pleasure, the Bais were capable of driving crazy a cross-section of client, patron, and spectators. They are primarily located in the courthouse around the city's red light area, and its commercial nucleus was Bara Bazar. The European audience went graphic on one such, the Nautch stories they held, which were performed in the house of Raja Ram Mohan Rai or Raja Navakrishna Dev's house in Shobha Bazar. This is a very, very interesting picture because here, on his first visit to India in 1875, Prince of Wales Edward, he actually attended a Nautch, and that triggered quite a stir across the empire and nation. Because after 1857, when actually the company's rule ended and Victoria herself took charge of India, there is a note came from the imperial missionary rhetoric, which was actually started framing the anti-Nautch movement. They explicitly pronounced that the dancer is an erogenous vice, a wrecker of the British home, and by extension the empire. Because before that, the British officials, merchants, married many of them and kept them as concubines. So after 1857, there is a strict order from the British Parliament not to kind of bring home these, sinful women. So this is the attendance of Prince Edward was actually taken as a betrayal of their civilizing mission. But the prince turned up once again at another Surrey in 1890, and it was followed by the next prince, George's indulgence of the same kind of indulgence in 1906. In one important message, the Brahmo reformer Keshab Chandra Sen said in a meeting of Punjab Purity Association that the hideous woman dances, and she smiles as she dances, and she casts furtive glances. Hell is in her eyes. In her breast is a vast ocean of poison. Round her comely waist dwell the furies of hell. Her blandishments are India's ruin. Alas, her smile is India's death. This is Keshab Chandra Sen, whose granddaughter, Sadhana Bose or Sadhana Sen, became one of the first leading Bollywood heroines, the dancing star of 1940s. So, and also Sadhana's father was instrumental in inviting Anna Pavlova to the city, and he was also instrumental in putting Uday Shankar in touch with Anna Pavlova. So this is Keshab Sen. Seeing the Nautch girl as a deadly or disastrous influence on the nation, Sen condemned the immoral practice of bringing the infamous courtesan, a public prostitute, into the mansion of patronizing millionaires. So as enlightenment pressed forward, the urban folk culture of Calcutta took a steady retreat. The municipal corporation commission pulled down many clubs, including the entertainments they offered. Hutum Pachar lamented over the waning good old days when the wealthy people did not bother much about politics and the press and spent their time in the company of the mistresses. They woke up after the noon. They had a soft spot for singers and musicians. Day was night to them and night day, but the time flew by quickly. Bhadralok started changing their habits. The Brahmo Samaj was established. The Dharma Sabha was set up. Hindu college, that is Presidency College, was founded. Bengali gradually turned their attention to doing good things. So all the bad nights kind of vanished. So the stage is now cleansed. And it was a joint undertaking of the colonial government as well as the colonized elite, and the family that took some leading role in they reclaimed the stage in terms of honor and morality, and they did not introduce the woman from Jatra in their own theater, but they actually enabled their own wives, daughters-in-law, to take part in public as well as private performance was the Tagores of Jodhpur, Rabindranath Tagore. So I am keeping this picture. These are all paintings by Rabindranath, and while Tagore actually left us with no single or simple formula to dance him out, Tagore deliberately blurred the binaries between the moti, the dancing woman, and the kulinari, housewife. But his dance widened the gap between the two categories of women, confirming and redefining the feminine and cultural properties of the new woman. While privileging the upper class elite woman, the birth of modern dance, the first modern dance, systematically excluded the existing mass of performing women from the new stage of the nation. But the nation-building exercise of the Bhadralok could no longer be, as we all know, fulfilled by the raunchy entertainment of the Chotaloks, infamous for the loose living practices. So in a short while, the Cantawalis and the Jhumurwalis, the Panchali singers, thriving so far in the city streets and village marts, were pushed to the dim violence of culture, and the highways of performance was now restored and repopulated by an exalted elite culture represented by the enlightened, convent-educated Bhadra Mohila. The curtains went up in the fag wind of 19th century in Jodhpur, where Tagore, not only Rabindranath, but Gaganendranath, the elder cousins of Rabindranath, they together formed their very own private theatre, Jorashako Natyashala, in 1865. And Rabindranath Tagore was called the Pope of Calcutta. He was a seated patriarch, but he allowed all his daughters-in-law, granddaughters, to appear as heroines of these public shows. And in his Zamindari cash book, there is a separate section on rehearsaler kharach, production, some other accounts for rehearsal, post-performance dinner, where they used to invite Governor Generals and Lady Hardinge or Lord Hardinge. And some of the performances were actually showed in order to raise money for famine, but sometimes also for the First World War. So it's an imperial fund where the Tagores performed in their own house, and they raised money for the imperial war fund. So in the first few plays, there was Sarojini, Olik Babu, Amon Kormo, Ar Korbona, Kadambari, Sharad Kumari. They all performed. It was a silent revolution in the making. The respectable women, they're all non-dancers. None of them actually dance for their livelihood, unlike the Cantowalis, but they dance for their passions, but slowly it became a ticketed show. The media welcomed the embryonic creative impulse of a reawakened nation. So one thing is very clear, that when the nation experiences spectacular assertion of nationalism in every realm of culture and politics, reinventing the Sanskritized dancing body from the golden past, Rabindranath foregrounded, maybe metaphorically, the subversive, the transgressive, and the defiant, and the outcast dancing bodies, reclaiming them from alternative tradition. None of them actually came from, none of the characters that we see, like Chandalika, Prakriti, Chitrangada, Noti, Srimati in Noti Puja, none of them are from actual Hindu text. They are from all Avadhan Shatak or Buddhist text. And Chitrangada is also a very peripheral character of Mahabharata. And here Arjuna is not the hero. It is the dual selves of Chitrangada who played with the sexual celibacy of Arjuna. So from page to stage, Tagore's avant-garde dance dramas thematically broke apart the iconic stereotypes of the nation, Radha, Sita, Shakuntala, mothers, lovers, or goddesses, as his unceasing experimentation with different physical traditions also marked the beginning of a structure-defining freestyle, a style free from every style. So that is a very different discourse altogether. We can talk about it. But very interestingly, Tagore used the body of the non-dancer without having any inherited practice to play out his politics of performance. He did not always kind of wanted a trained dancer's body. He was rather kind of very uncomfortable with the trained classical dancer, be it Bharatanatyam or Kathak. But sometimes he used the free-flowing, spontaneous, non-dance theatrical movements, and he privileged the agency of that dancer. Despite the sanitizing effects of Brahmo Puritanism, after all, he also hailed from a Brahmo family. Dancing by respectable women did not pass without reproach, and dancers had to withstand slanders, scandals, and even though they displayed more about feminine Manipuri, and the upper torso of their body was covered with a number of sashes. But in spite of inviting constant censure from the contemporary society, Tagore succeeded to generate a responsiveness from the Bhadralok, from the Bengali society at large, and a new universe of dance theatre that evolved with Tagore decolonized the female body, female dancing bodies, not from any style, not from any authentic style, and not kind of, you're not there to present something authentic and pure. Rather, Tagore actually started to de-authenticate the dance movement and they wrote new histories of freedom through an unabashed, embodied performance of resistance and subversion of the patriarchal order. So, but I think historical narratives on this fascinating chapter of Indian dance history, India's cultural history and gender history is sometimes very silent, and nothing is written about the women dancers who stepped a little beyond the classical spiritual repertoire, and especially the timing is very important. The 1914, 1917, when Gandhi was actually staging his non-cooperation movement, or in the 1930s when he was staging the Salt March, Tagore was talking about Shapmochon or Borsha Mongol. Sharala Devi Chaudhurani, Tagore's own niece, and he was also very close to Mahatma Gandhi. He wrote in a very strident backlash that when the nation is burning, how can you stage Borsha Mongol, the songs of rains? And Swaraj was more important at the moment. And Tagore also that is a different work where I have talked about the correspondence between Tagore and Sharala Devi. That your Swaraj is like a bubble. It will actually disappear one day, but my songs will retain. So that is an unending controversy, and we should not go into it. But with a drastic departure from the idealized woman as Bharat Mata, woman as nation, Tagore's dance dramas made a decisive and liberating break with the past. So this is the first dance musical drama. This is not a dance drama. 1861, just back from England, Tagore staged Valmiki Pratibha. Nothing to do with Ramayana, the maker of Valmiki. But here, Ratnakar, the dacoit, he became Valmiki. And what is important is the kind of appropriation, integration, expansion of transcultural influence. Here in this video I'm going to show, where we can find that it's a fashionable theatrical entertainment, as statesman hailed it, that it was some realistic stage setting. There is a good deal of English influence in an otherwise charming Bengali performance. The forest of Valmiki, Ratnakar, looked like the forest of Midsummer's Night's Dream, and robbers represented the French soldiers, and also sometimes the Arabian Nights Chalice Chor. So there is many influences into the melting pot. So let's see, I'm sharing with you a clipping from, this is,
Rabindranath had become acquainted with Western music. Some of the tunes he had learned found their way into his enchanting opera, Valmiki Pratibha.
But this film was made in 1961, the centenary year. Yeah. And they created actual rain in Lira Shaka. Yeah. There's always, as I said, post-performance dinner, and these are some special shows. But Balmiki Pratibha was also staged variously, and this is all about Jorashako. When Jorashako introduced women from the educated middle class within the very sheltered house of the Tagores in North Calcutta, Tagore created his own school, own university, some 100 kilometers away from the city, in Shantiniketan. That drew a wider participation of women in 1902, and especially in the first few decades of the 20th century. Shantiniketan opened up a wider performative space, participatory space for women, and I also witnessed the growth of a dance language. Because dance emerged not merely as just a performance, but it is a key curriculum in the holistic education system. It had a pedagogic unit, nestling a world university, Vishwabharati. Entwining the performative with the pedagogic mission, Tagore made dance a kinesthetic mode of community celebration in festivals like Tree Planting Festival, Vriksharopan Utsav, Megh Utsav, and of course Bashant Utsav, that is the spring festival that we call Holi. Drawing inspiration from the open-air Bengali folk tribal performance, the proscenium of Amrakunjo and Gaur Prangon reached out to a cohesive community of audience participants. So the journey started maybe with Notit Puja in 1926 with an all-woman and woman-centric dance drama. But later, actually, Tagore became a more serious dance maker. So these are the influences that we have been able to chart out. The South Asian influences, the book is called Jabha Bali Mrityugit. It was a part of the syllabus of Shantiniketan. But after 1941, after Tagore's death, Jabha Bali or South Asian dance was not in the syllabus, unfortunately. So, and this is, as I was just sharing it with the director of Max Mueller Bhavan, that in 1927, Srimati Tagore went to the School of Myriad in Dresden and learned some innovative expressionist moves. I had a picture where Srimati Tagore danced with Tagore's live recitation, and Nandalal painted that picture, but somehow I lost the entire file from my earlier laptop. This is Ruth St. Denis with Tagore, and Ruth St. Denis in 1913 presented Chitra, not Chitrangada, because Chitrangada is not written in 1913. 1913 was also the year when Tagore received the Nobel Prize. And in Carnegie Hall, Ruth St. Denis presented Chitra from the narrative verse which Tagore written in 1892. So Denis was always kind of interested to come to Vishwabharati, and Tagore also approached Ruth St. Denis to sometimes to come to Calcutta, but that never happened actually. So this is a new freedom movement on stage. The contemporary magazine called Forward said that Tagore actually started a new freedom movement on stage. It is not the freedom movement that the nation was witnessing at the time, but it's a very different one. There are some pictures, Notit Puja. This is also the film that Tagore made in 1931, and this is the only one film, which was a major flop, of course, sponsored by New Theatres. And this is the painting by Nandalal. This is the film, sorry. And Tagore with dances, Kashif Desh. This is Shama, Nandita Kripalli, and daughter of Nandalal Boshu, Jamuna, Chitrangada. This is also Chitrangada. Daughter-in-law, she is playing the role of Arjun, Nivedita, the woman standing. She's the daughter-in-law of Nandalal Bosh. This is Mrinalini Swaminathan, now Mrinalini Sarabhai, as the mother of Chandalika, sitting in the sitting position, and this is... and if you can look at the costume, there is no sachet, no kind of anything hanging to cover the upper torso. This was actually designed by Tagore and Pratima Tagore. Now, these days, the only authentic costume that Shantiniketan says that is the mark of Tagorean tradition is something else. But Tagore's dance costume actually went on kind of experimenting with different, diverse styles. And there is no kind of cover on the upper torso of women dancers. I'm just leaving it. I'm not. Do you want to? Okay. It's a very different thing. The Tagore's doodles. Nothing to do with dance, though. But I think that is the inspiration of the images that he actually wanted. The abstract realism, nothing. So as I said, that in the creative laboratory of Shantiniketan, Kathakali made Jujutsu, and Manipuri blended Javanese Legong. Tagore also invited someone called Shinzo Tagakaki from Japan to teach the female students some Jujutsu twist. So, and also the interwar period, 1920s and 1930s, was marked by Tagore's frequent visits to Italy, Germany, United States, and a new politics of modern dance swayed all over the classical, especially in Central Europe and in America. So the period, also I think the period was very crucial as far as India's modern dance movement is concerned, and the female dancing body emerged as a focal point of artistic experimentations of Rabindranath, and it was not merely dramatic, virile, something fluid and sinuous. So I'm moving to Shankar very briefly. Around the time Tagore was presenting his new dance to the critical eye of the spectators of Calcutta, in a more ambitious dance project came to the forefront. After more than 2 years of continuous traveling and performing abroad, Uday Shankar Dance Company came to Calcutta for the first time in 1933 for its first appearance, and the first show was held in Calcutta between 3rd July to 15 September 1933. There were 42 shows, after which the company left for the second tour of Europe and America. So, at the time, Mayor of Calcutta was Dr. Bidhan Chandra Roy, who was later to become our Chief Minister. So he acclaimed the dancer by saying that you have made dance relive again in your animated gestures, in cosmic rhythms, in divine poses, in your excellent interpretation of epical dance, by recovering the mystic language of Indian dancing from the petrified repositories of our ancient stone and bronze. You have held up before the admiring gaze of a wondering world. I think all these lines are actually talking about something that you have rescued dance from petrified bronze and stone. So already kind of a dividing line was being made before something that is classical and something that Uday Shankar was doing, maybe. Soon after, Shankar was invited by Tagore to visit Vishwabharati, Shantiniketan. And when the poet, or where the poet was actually involved in his own way to create something that is not very linear, not something very uniformed. Shankar recalled much later and shared with his biographer Mohan Khokar that Tagore advised me to go ahead and not to bother about society. He too helped me to take dance in a different light, to respect it as an art. I think dancing is as serious and as necessary as anything else that you can think of. On his return, Shankar received a letter from Tagore, and all of us are familiar with that letter, that we are sure of his genius because your creations will not be a mere imitation of the past, nor burdened with narrow conventions of provincialism. Given a time when Shankar's dance was largely viewed as oriental and exotic by the Western media, Tagore was perhaps the only voice of caution against the bent of auto-exoticization. He said, we must never shut it within the bounds of a stagnant ideal, not define it as either Indian or Oriental or Occidental, for such finality, the interesting word, finality, only robs it of life's privilege, that is freedom. The letter revealed a simultaneous anxiety in narrating a chronicle of degeneration, where dance fell from the life of a buoyant life to stagnant pools of muddy impurities. Once again, the cleansing became necessary, and because dance is catering to a diseased mind that has lost its normal appetites. As the poet asked the dancer to develop a new aesthetic reflecting the modernity of an urban middle class, Shankar confirmed later that I want my country to take dance seriously and to respect it. And to some extent, I think I have succeeded. Shankar's success did not resonate well with the votaries of classical, but because he undeniably worked against the Indian classical grid and he carried his experimentations at the meeting points of transnational cultural intersections, yet it would be an oversimplification to posit Shankar as a Bengali artist, since he carried out his ventures mostly outside Bengal. So he was an outsider within the framework of South Asian cultural nationalism. He was a floating figure who traversed between two worlds, the Euro-American and the Asian, without even wholly belonging to either one. Nationalism and colonialism, as dance scholars today agree, are not merely external context, but actually the context within which Shankar performed and created his repertoire. You have already seen Kalpana, which is 1948, and it took 7 more years for the shooting. But I think that I must say that Uday Shankar has achieved all he could do, as Mohan Khokar said, with magnificent fullness before the war, and the rest was anticlimax. The Calcutta chapter unfortunately signaled one of his declines. Shankar's arrival in Calcutta during his reigning years was expedited by an official invitation from the Chief Minister, Bhavan at the time, who invited him to take charge of the new established State Academy of Dance, Drama and Music, which was actually a regional counterpart of Sangeet Natak Academy and the National Center of Performing Arts. And Shankar also became the dean of Rabindranath Tagore University of the dance department. And Shankar decided to settle in Calcutta, the city he hated, but his wife, Amala, loved. Their advent undeniably opened up new possibilities of innovative dance making in the city, setting new standards of professionalism. Calcutta witnessed in the next few years some varied vignettes, both old and new, from clippings of Ramlila, Kalpana, and one spectacular ballad called Life of Buddha, which was funded by UNESCO. And in 1961, based on Tagore's poem Samanyo Khoti, Shankar presented the Stana to commemorate Tagore's birth centenary. Widely appreciated by the Bengali audience, the dance drama, however, did not narrate any part of the poem, nor used any of Tagore's song. That is a very different story altogether. But despite such blockbusters, 1960s signaled a steady waning of Shankar's magic, Shankar's charisma, with his avowed declaration that I will dance till I am 80 or till people shoo me off the stage. In truth, Shankar was losing his grip, yet undefeated by a frail health and a disastrous tour of America in 1968, Shankar came up with his last masterpiece, Shankarscope, a new form of bioscope. It was an ingenious juxtaposition of stage and screen. Shot within a 16mm camera, it had no story, but comprised of 21 unconnected sequences. It's a commercial letdown. Once again, Shankarscope gave Shankar the last opportunity to play with magic and to recreate his own magic, perhaps for the last time. Many believe that there is no identifiable heritage from Shankar's dance, and many mourn the disappearance of Shankar from public memory. One part of his legacy was retained by his wife, his dance partner, Amala Shankar. Even after virtual separation from her husband, she possessed and held together ancestry of a century-old repertoire. And as Shankar's legal heir, Amala continued to head Uday Shankar India Culture Center, inscribing his legacy in the most truthful and authentic manner. This kind of obsession with authenticism sometimes also leads to some other problem. The cultural capital has been passed on almost as a birthright and a legitimate artistic inheritance to Mamata Shankar, his daughter and daughter-in-law, Tanushree Shankar. So here I am taking the intermission.
Is once again can be translated as Daughters of Your Art. This is a choreography by Dr. Shankar in the middle, and this is based on Rabindranath Tagore's Chandalika. And Chandalika, if she did not use the dance drama, she used the prose, the actual drama, where we have the dialogue between the mother and daughter, both untouchable. There is not a single male figure in the prose, the native prose. It is called Goethe-Institut. It was written when Ambedkar was pressing for a separate electorate for the Dalits. And Gandhi was kind of took that demand to a non-negotiable front and went on the longest fast, 5-day-long fast in Pune, Yeravada. It was 1932. Before that, in the Karachi session of Indian National Congress passed a resolution that from today, well and public tanks and water bodies would be available to the Dalits. They would not be considered untouchable. And Gandhi said to Ambedkar that we are not going to kind of give, or already there was demand from Jinnah and everything, so you don't, please, it's Hariharan, and they are not Dalit, they are Harijans. Later Ambedkar criticized Gandhi for this political stunt, like, Anasan. But Tagore rushed to Yeravada at that time, though he was also not very kind of, the political drama, Tagore was not very an important part of it. But Tagore wrote Chandalika. And the entire conversation, after many years, when I read it, because I'm almost part of it, and Manjushri deliberately used the prose, the language, the drama, it's not the songs, but the conversation between mother and daughter, that continuously challenging Brahmanic patriarchy, continuously challenging dharma, and the female body, how you can turn the body as polluting. And there is a well, and here Buddha and Buddha's agent, a missionary, Ananda, comes as a romantic intervention And Manjushri's dance drama, there is no Anand. Anand is just a light, and there is no male figure. So, for many dance scholars actually think that it is one of the major statements on Dalit feminism, because Manjushri was very, I will come to that later. So, Ranjanati played the role of Prakriti and Manjushri's Maya. Just behind Manjushri, this is me. So let's start. I will kind of read some portions of her life story, because otherwise it's not kind of easy to introduce Manjushri Chakraborty. I took the interpret because meanwhile partition happened, right? Or 1930s, it's a very different story by a middle class woman, middle class girl from East Pakistan. And in her, the first line of her autobiography, that is also a kind of line from Tagore's song from Noti Puja. She said, if I want to talk about Navamrita means new dance, which they innovated, and the Christian as Navamrita. And in any Indian language, Nava means new, Nritya means dance. So Navamrita, the regional languages also, we can have the same meaning. I have to narrate, if I want to talk about the new dance, I have to narrate my entire journey of life. How I have become a dancer, all through my life. I cannot remember a day when I was not dancing. So as a contemporary Indian dancer choreographer, Manjushri offers the clues herself to read her autobiography, to read her story of life in tandem with her dance and vice versa. So we here would like to interweave her life story in dialogue with her danced over, and because her story is also a signature of herself in the moving space and a testimony of a new woman's life who danced out hard resistance against the hegemonic mainstream and mainstream cultural diction. So it was written and published, her autobiography was during the last years of her life, and her book was rushed into publication a month after the suicide of her daughter, a tragedy that numbed her emotions and killing her gruffly before her actual death. Overtaken by a series of personal disasters, the memoir, not surprisingly, suffers from major slippages. Before amnesia took over her remarkable memory, she started recollecting events, losing the thread somewhere in between, and then painfully realizing that an incurable renal disease had damaged her vision beyond repair. While styling out herself from the stage of life, Manjushri's book hurriedly, when released in the International Calcutta Book Fair, it was a slipshod publication, an inadequate tribute to a stunning dancer, scholar, and a beautiful storyteller. But Manjushri took a painful exit. In June 2000, she left behind a thriving legacy of a contemporary dance movement which has a syllabus of its own, and a life story wrapped up in less than 100 pages. So, today we can locate her within and against many journeys of other dancers to see how their contemporary dancers' signatures vary from each other. And finally, let me start with some of the major milestones of her life. In Bhavan, in the 1930s, she was born on 28 August 1934 in Murshidabad. But her father has a transferable job, and she was transferred to Bhavan, which is in East Pakistan at that time. And in Bhavan in the 1930s, it was not impossible for a middle-class Bengali girl to dance, because already, as I said, that Tagore's and Shankar's already set the stage for middle-class women to start dancing or to practice dancing if the family actually encourages that. So in Bhavna, as a little girl, I appeared in the role of Srimati in Noted Puja, which is Tagore's Pujarini. A saffron ghagra was tailor-made for my last song, Namo He Namo, to worship Lord Buddha. But at the final act, in a beautifully lit up stage, my knickers came rolling down to my feet under the ghagra. I could not get up to finish the act. Oh, how did I forget? On my way from the school, I tied the strings of the knickers on the branch of a tree to create a swing. 2. Maybe one day, for some obvious reasons, I would have to stop dancing by the age of 11 or 12. Because all my sisters got married, and I had to slip into sari by discarding my frock. This, however, was not to be. Partition happened, and we were forced to relocate in Calcutta. Leaving behind the sprawling house with 10 big and 5 small rooms, our family took refuge in a small room in Chunan Banerjee Road in central Calcutta. The riot broke out shortly after. But what sustained me to endure through such distress was my dance. In the pages of her autobiography, Manjusri categorically celebrated independence. And she thought that partition saved her life, partition saved her culture, partition saved our dance. And this kind of not a very kind of mourning over losing some lands, but kind of coming to Calcutta. It's a city, it's a very different city. In 1954-55, okay, let me just add that Manjusri was one of the, she came to Calcutta in 1946. In 1943, Presidency College was made co-education. And Manjusri was one of the few refugee women who got admitted in Kolkata's Presidency College. And it was in the 1950s that she also came in touch with Jadavpur University, the married Rabindranath singer, who did not care much about the Vishwabharati, Shantiniketani, notations of Tagore, and he sang in his own way, and he encouraged Manjusri to dance a new kind of dance by breaking away from the run-of-the-mill Rabindranath style, right? So in 1954-55, I got a job, it's a different story, of a part-time lecturer in Bengali literature in Calcutta's South City College. One day, one of my colleagues inquired, "Are you a professional dancer?" I fumbled, "Yes, I dance." Another cracked him, "Why are you here? Dance is your actual profession." It seemed that dancing as a profession was despicable, and it actually doesn't match with my otherwise respectable profession of a professor. Anyway, I lost my job within a few months. In 1955, I applied for a fellowship in the Sangeet Natak Academy in the creative dance category. There was a category in 1950, I think, for creative dance as well. In spite of my long training in classical forms, and in spite of Guru Prahlad Das, who insisted to perform Bharatanatyam in that event, I decided to go beyond the classical, and my take was on Tagore, which I choreographed far extremely differently, not in accordance with the Shantiniketani style. Nandita Kripali was there, and she said to Manjusri that the dance of Dada Moshai was an end in itself. It has no future after Dada Moshai, and that my grandfather stayed. I could not get that scholarship. In America, Manjusri got married in 1958. She went to live in Africa, Nsukka, Nigeria, and her first school started in Nigeria. Rabindranath was born in Nigeria in 1963, but in 1966, the family shifted to New Paltz, America, where Professor Shankar, Manjusri's husband, was Professor Suni, the State University of New York, New Paltz. He's a professor of geography. So in America, Manjusri started dancing once again, and she was also enrolled as a student of modern dance in State University of New York, and also started her second innings academically, and started reading cultural anthropology. And she earned her PhD from Columbia University, and her PhD was on Lai Naropa of Manipur, and she worked on the Meitei movement. And that is also once again a very different work on feminism in Manipur. But it was a different story of performance also. In America, my sponsors wanted me to showcase the pure Indian classical before the Western audience because they wanted to see something exotic, something true and authentic. In the first half, out of harm's way, I personified the veritable Radha. But after the break, I slipped into a contemporary girl, fleshing out the radical bodies of Tagore. Now, at the East-West encounter, 1985, we staged Tomari Mati Korda, a takeoff from Tagore's Chandarika. The panel roundly disparaged my approach as pre-modern and passe, discarding Tagore down as old hat, while Chandarika and Kumudini Lakya championed non-literal contemporary form, changing and challenging traditional vocabularies of Bharatanatyam and Kathak. My synthesis of several physical traditions did not seem to hold water. Back home, the Kolkata audience, especially the orthodox Rabindranath, accused me of reckless departure from the 1930s. In 1994-95, I was awarded the Sangeet Natak Academy Award, the highest state recognition for my contribution in creative dance. I had to wait for 40 years to achieve that. There are many significant kind of breaks, several shifts, and it was not a very happy journey, and it was not a very happy life also. But as I begin by quoting her own words, some low and some high points of life, within various patterns of her life moments, I want to trace her voice and her subjectivity. As I had just said, that I want to shift my attention from the body to the historic and gender identities of the dancer that shaped her idiom, and seeing her embodied politics as an invasive repertoire of her life patterns flowing through the social, the political, and the personal. Weaving the many fractured selves into a continuous whole through an intra-text double reading of her life and dance, her autobiography presents a daunting presentation or progression of herself across time and space. Born in Murshidabad, Manjushree spent her childhood in Patna, but she rose to prominence as a creative dancer in 1950 in post-independence Calcutta. A feminist and an anthropologist, a dancer with her self-invented idiom, her journey meandered through seminal political moments of India's history, bearing open the political tensions of her time, living and getting through the cultural and sexual politics of the new nation. She told many tales in her life story, but a host of others remains untold. Dislocated by the Boundary Commission's awards, her narrative met a sudden and abrupt disjunction when the idyllic village life was marred by a sudden disfigurement in the political map, forcing a mass exodus to India from East Pakistan. Earning independence at the cost of a triply sliced, riot-stricken nation, her family joined the endless stream of refugees to take shelter in a dingy room in Kolkata. Riots, mayhem, and expatriation. To the girl of 14, this was what freedom meant. Yet, partition was a saving grace. She spoke, and her book comes unscathed by the melancholic languor over lost lands, as Manjushree geared up to take the air, to take in the air of the city, crossing over new rails. Evincing many shades of coloniality and post-coloniality, Manjushree's idiom was evolved from the fickle culturescape of Bengal before traveling to Africa and America. That artistic encounters that further changed her dance lines. Exposed to a variety of physical traditions from classical to folk, Manjushree was a student of Nritya Bharati and Bhavan art display in the 1950s, and she took training under veteran gurus like Manutappa Pillai, Gopala Pillai, Bharatanatyam, and Indra Kumar Pattanayake, Odissi, and also Gotipua. She was one of the few dancers, female dancers, who took training in Gotipua. She took training in Manipuri under Akamusi, but all in the same school of Prahlad Das. Prahlad Das was the father of Chitres Das. in Nritya Bharat. She was also a student because she was a refugee. She could not kind of afford to pay the veteran gurus who by 1950s came and settled down in Kolkata. Even so, these are the names that I can remember. During the same time, I think it was Nehruvian era, opened up some exchange of artists, and Kolkata's new theatre staged Martha Graham's Game of the Heart, and also Bolshoi Ballet, and also some pioneering at the time the theatres. Manjushri wrote in her autobiography that I bought the 1 rupee ticket and watched Martha Graham every show. There is two double show, and she watched every show. And from third theatre movement of Pavan Sarkar, Manjushri was exposed to a variety of theatrical and dance traditions. In her autobiography, she gasped about her dual ventures with Devabrata Vishwas, evading the buzzing rumors that haunt the duo, that tied in a bond of controversies on and off stage. Sleepless after watching Uday Shankar's Kalpana, Manjushri was silent about her rejection at the audition of Uday Shankar's company because Amala Shankar rejected Manjushri because she was too tall to join the chorus. Manjushri was almost 5'7", and the dance chorus of Uday Shankar was not kind of such a tall dancer. You cannot be a part of our troupe. And Manjushri was also rejected by Vishwabharati, Shantanikita. Her style was too bold, and she never rejected Kuru, the ankle weights, where the later Rabindranath never used Kuru in dancing decor. So these are the rejections which she never had written, but as one of her students, she spoke a lot about this in her class. So, and in her classroom teachings, she talked about the rejections, the continuous rejections, from Sangeet Natak Academy to Uday Shankar, from Rabindranath Shantiniketan, everywhere. 1950s was a time of rejection from industry, and that kick-started that untried alternative third, a dance that arguably signaled a paradigm shift from the colonial modern, from the household Rabindranath, and from the neoclassical creative Shankar Karana. In her later years, she won a battle against cancer, and the sexagenarian dancer was elated to receive the prestigious Sangeet Natak Academy for a creative dance. Basking in its success, she husked up the quivering defeats of her life, distancing her life from her life story. So I am, now I think there are too many things. This is also from Aishika in the 1990s. This is based on the Chipko movement. It's a story that and Ranjanati was a prolific writer also, and she wrote on a number of things, but in the book called Rasa, New Directions of Indian Dance, published by Sunil Kothari, Ranjanati kind of theorized about it, and there she said that it is not a gharana, it is not about Guru Shishya Parampara, because Ranja critiqued the Guru Shishya Parampara, where she said in one of her articles that the system is patriarchal, where the training system is masculine penetrative, and the body of the disciple is always feminine receptive. And the kind of surrendering the entire soul, body to a tradition which one has to intake without any question. And that is critiqued by both Manjushri as well as by Ranjanati. So what is Navadrita? Navadrita is a movement. It's a psychophysical exercise. It's not a style, it is an idiom. But simultaneously, Dancers Guild has developed its own methodology of training. There are 8 groups of methodology. In my Bengali book, I have elaborated the inspirations, the kind of clues and cues from where all the movements started, from Bhumisparsha, from floor movements to the middle of Madhavangi, Sthanaka Veda, that is position change or the changing of stances. Then comes Ullamphana, the jumps, and Urdhagati. Urdhagati is mostly inspired by Mayurbhaja Chow. That is something that is actually, you're taking the body to a different way, and also from Purulia Chow jumps, mostly from the martial arts. Kalari, Chow, and from Chow Sarakala, Mayurbhaja, and Purulia Chow. Urdhagati, Ullamphana, and Bhammi Shamashti, that is a unit of movements. Manjushri has kind of movement number 5, movement number 4, that is not one, but a collage of various movements, and later she named them. She was always kind of a vernacular name. Vernacular was nice to guys. So Vajragati, Ashagati, Shanghatta, Shangharsha. So that is the kind of movement that we have in our class. So do this one, not number 5, but Vajragati. And they are also inspired by different Karanas and yoga, and of course from Bharatanatyam, Odissi, and Kathakali. But what is important is that I think that while reclaiming their tradition, always in their own terms, both Manjushri and Ronja, I think there is a clear touch of Western choreographic influence. The choreography, if you see in Tomari Matrikorna, that is clearly there is serious traces of Alvin Ailey, and Martin Graham was always there. That is after our first art session. And also I think the Marsh Hariharan, Paul Teller, because Manjushri spent her long years, more than 14 years in New York, when modern dance was making waves, she said, and it was deeply touched by those movements. But while choreographing some of her later productions, later dance theatres, I think she became a little non-literal, become non-narrative. So the major thing I think in this first encounter, one thing is that whereas Chandra Lekha and Kubudi Lakia, when I met Sadanand advised me to go to NCPA and to check the files. So I went to NCPA. I checked the files, and I find serious criticism by Suli Kuchani of Manjushri's dance. Later Suli became such a good friend of mine. Because Manjushri, she was not very happy with Vaishnavas, and also kind of Raja also kind of retorted in her later writings about what is Indian dance, that is for us, how to reclaim it or how to present it. But anyway, I think there are two major points. One is that according to the contemporary dances of the 1980s and 1990s, contemporary dance has to follow a model that is no story approach. Dancers from Bengal always try to narrate a story, be it Shankar, be it Rabindranath, be it Manjushri or Raja, even Cassandra talks about a story, Lagaran Savana or Nagavatana. They always kind of narrate the story. Even Ekaharya, if anyone should sing it as Cassandra, it's rather vague according to the Bengali critics, but there is a storyline. But dance should be non-literal, and the new dances of 1980s in the East-West encounter. And secondly, there should not be many styles woven into one. Maybe one single style. Maybe that is because Manjushri was, once again, she fell back to Rabindranath Tagore's chemical synthesis, the term coined by Pratima Devi, that we should not be loyal to one single style. We have the right to kind of hybridization, it's called cross-fertilization of many and varied physical movements. So Manjushri always tried to evolve our own idiom, our style, as I said, the unit of movements of collage, by integrating, appropriating, absorbing various styles and then made our own language, our own signature style, something like that. So I think in these pictures, there are many styles and she's still experimenting. This is the 1950s. But this is a later picture of Tomari Matrikona in late 1990s. Tomari Matrikona at East-West Encounter 1985 is rather unfinished, unpolished. It was, Dancers Guild was not, they're just coming back from America. And after a very casual tour of Ajanta Ellora, they just kind of, Mumbai, I think Manjushri took it rather very casually. But the encounter shook her. And as she said, I felt very insecure deep inside. That this is not going to kind of, I'm back from America, but Indian contemporary dance, the Dancers Guild was not there at that time. So it was an eye-opener. It was a stock-taking exercise. And the emergence of Chandralekha and Kumudini Natya, it's a huge challenge to Indian dance as a whole, because their dance had already changed and challenged the face, the kind of plastic minds. They had kind of removed something from the dancing bodies. So I think from 1990s onward, maybe for a very, very brief period, Chandralekha, Kumudini Natya and Manjushri, of course, from Calcutta, they had been able to make their choreographies their own statements. As Ranjapati said, that contemporary dance for me is not a thrill, as now in dance reality shows, and on YouTube is the new guru. We know we don't need to kind of practice dance, we have everything in the YouTube. So this is purely political for me. This is my existence as an artist. I have to be a contemporary artist. It's all from Tomari Matrikona. And this is a choreography. I think this is nothing to do with Chandalika per se, but this is from Cassandra. These are the influences that, oh sorry. This was actually the time when I was talking about 1960s, where the American audience wanted something truly Indian dance that is classical. This is Ranja in the late 1990s when she was collaborating with the international artist. She cut shorter hair and this roots of modality, I think, that actually talks about the. I think just 10 minutes. I need some discussion because there is a. Otherwise, I can go on, but I think I want to listen. The state of art was. The manuscript was possibly short, right? Check. You bring her again.
Can I start with a few thoughts and maybe a question on the back of it? Because we decided to have Aishika come and talk to us. It's also from a sort of a deep need to contextualize how we can, talk about contemporary dance, because it's become such a vague word. problematize the word and see how we can define it. In fact, there are no singular definitions possible. And every region has its own history, its own urgency, its own expression. And it's impossible to standardize, and it's impossible to nationalize or make one model. And today was actually a super way to look at, not just the history of a body. I like the way you started. It's not the history of the body, but rather a history of personal, individual lives and what went into the making of a certain history. Which is twisting the whole thing, the lens a little bit. I was personally very interested in the words de-authenticate, or we were talking about Tagore and the Rabindranath idea of creating a new dance to universalize. Noticing that a lot of the way of defining it was through the negation of, or rather stating what it is not. How then did it become this vigorous form, and what became what were the steps, or what were the ideas, or what were the ways to build a body of dance and system of training, whether it was Tagore or Uday Shankar's, I love the auto-exotifying red flag that was raised, because it's still today very, very, relevant. It's still happening all over again for entirely different reasons, of a different kind of nation building, a nation which we are not actually comfortable with, a notion of a nation. So I just wonder if there is another whole session perhaps, which can go into unraveling these terms in terms of what it then means to build a body of knowledge. Of course, keeping in mind the whole social, political, ideological persuasions that have gone into those choices, because the aesthetic is empty without that. And that's what your talk today is pushing me to think about. So I'm just going to leave that thought there. I don't know if you want to respond to it, or anybody wants to respond to it, but I will do that.
For Tagore and for Uday Shankar, the process of de-authentication was very deliberate, I think, because Tagore, when he started his school, he invited Buddhimandra Singh and Navakumar Singh, the Manipuri teachers, for the first Manipuri lessons. But after some time, he told Navakumar that your Manipuri is good, but it's very repetitive. So I cannot actually make an entire dance drama with Manipuri itself. And Pratima Devi was she proudly claimed that our Chitrangala is based on Manipuri. But if you travel all over Manipur, you can't find a single trace of our dance in Manipur. So I will say that deliberately they tried to distance that yes, we are not going to be loyal to the national, though at the time the national classical was not there, right? Though I like Sada's comment, nation was always in the making. The nation in the making, the nation was always in the making. There was always a kind of a thrust to make something national, classical. And Tagore also invited some dancer from Malabar. We don't know. He said that Malabari Nachni, and she was almost a faculty in Vishwabharati. And as Pratima Devi herself stated, that the way Tagore's songs was created, a take from Baul, take from Kirtan, take from, borrowed from some Western dance, but finally the finished product is Rabindranath Tagore. Right. So the same way the vocabularies will be gathered, collected, appropriated, absorbed. Appropriate is not the right word as far as Tagore is concerned. And then a whole new universe of dance language, a whole new language of theatre would come into being. So it is, I will try one song, okay. So one song is very popular in Bangladesh. Hori name jagat matale eklani mahi হরিনামে জগৎ মাতালে একলা নিমাই একলা নিমাই একলা নিমাই একলা নিমাই একলা নিমাই হরিনামে জগৎ মাতালে একলা নিমাই. This is a song, one Nimai, that is Vaishnava, Sri Chaitanya. He had rocked the entire world with his single force of bhakti. And Tagore just heard the song and he wrote, Jodi tor dak shunde keu na ashe, tobe ekla cholo re, tobe ekla cholo, ekla cholo, ekla cholo. Nothing to do with the bhakti song. This became, Tagore sang Bengal into a nation. It was written during the partition Bengal movement, and now even in Kahani you can find how Amitabh Bachchan is rendering the song with the whole new melody. It becomes the ringtone of our movement. So this is the way he had one song and he kind of created something new. The same, I think this is called the authentication. But Shankar, I have heard from someone that his Pribhamgi was always like this, 1, 2, 3. That was not a perfect rhythm. I think Manjushri and Rajavati beg to differ from their predecessors. For Manjushri, our Sthanaka, our Tribhanga can never be inaccurate. No. That is the problem. That is the question that I want to ask Manjushri now. That why you are so very obsessed with your perfect position? And our hand gestures, everything has to be very, very accurate. Your body should be correct. Samapada, Tribhanga, Kashapada, oh my God. So our positions mattered all the time. And we have our separate Bharatanatyam class, separate Manipuri class. We have to take training under classical gurus. In between, the summer workshops are always there. So Manjushri was very particular about the grammar, that you have to know the grammar first, and then you write modern poetries, then you write your upanas. So that is the problem. I think 1990s once again, belong to a very specific, rigorous training in the style, in the classical style. So all our gurus, we are not very kind of. And she was very critical about the Shanti Niketani style. This is not going to work. So you have to be very, your spine, your movement, and each and every movement is coming from that, their Karana. And she always asked us to visit the Chidambaram temple and look at how if I place a drop of water on your nose, it has to kind of reach you. And even today, I cannot kind of stand in the authenticated human. For me, my dance is based on something authentic, and then I can go on, expand my horizon, and so that is the problem. That is the difference between Uday Shankar, Rabindranath and Mueller. Our style is based on classical.